Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." He replied, "What do you wish for me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord. This passage that we just heard from the Gospel always gives me a little bit of a laugh. Not because of what's being discussed. I mean, it's actually a pretty serious conversation. But because of how, once again, the disciples just really don't get what's going on here. The passage that we just heard, which is from chapter 10 of Mark's Gospel, begins with verse 35. And if you were to go back just a couple verses, you would read this. They were on the way, going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus went ahead of them. This movement to Jerusalem being Christ's movement towards his passion and death. Going on, they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. Taking the 12 aside again, he began to tell them what was going to happen to him. "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and hand him over to the Gentiles." This is the third and final prediction that Christ offers to his disciples regarding his death. And then we move right into today's passage, where James and John make this bold request to sit at the left and right of Christ, to be his highest-ranking officials in the messianic future that they anticipate. And in light of what Christ had just said, can you imagine any request which is more tone-deaf? Jesus had just indicated that he is going up to Jerusalem to die, to be killed. And the only thing that James and John can think of is themselves, their own ambition. You can understand why the other disciples became indignant. And the only question is, are they indignant because of how the request of James and John completely misses the mark? Or are they indignant because James and John beat them in asking for a promotion? Now, last week, as part of our preaching series on Christian service, I spoke of the resistance that we can experience when it comes to service. And it all boiled down to this, that we often consider service as an obstacle to our happiness, as having to give up our time or our ambition, having to give up the goals of our life. But the thing is, that isn't exactly true if you think about it. The Lord doesn't ask for us to give up our ambitions, and He doesn't ask us to waste our time. Instead, He asks us to make God the goal of our lives. And we can see that in today's gospel. In asking Christ for a place of honor, James and John are clearly being pretty ambitious, but the Lord doesn't chastise them for it. Instead, He basically says, you will receive these things, you just don't understand how yet. And notice what Christ says to the disciples next. You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be first among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. Developing our hearts for Christian service, then, again, it doesn't mean giving up on any aspirations in life. It doesn't mean just wasting our time. But it means shifting our goals and aspirations from worldly things to heavenly things. Not giving up things and living a life of misery, but longing and hoping for really so much more. As Christ said, as Christians, to serve each other is to be great. That the first among us is the one who serves all. Because it is in serving that we become like Christ. So again, we don't just yield our hopes and dreams, our goals and ambitions, and become empty beings, aimlessly helping others as we just kind of wait out the rest of our lives. Instead, we elevate our goals to the highest good, to God Himself, who is inviting us to be like Him and to one day be with Him. Not less, but more. And our acts of service, they flow directly from our desire to live in God's love, to live as saints. Now, as we seek to develop the heart of a servant, there are a couple of things that we need to watch out for, to be on guard against. And these pitfalls which can get in the way of our serving out of heavenly ambition rather than earthly concern. And being aware of these pitfalls is helpful, first of all, in keeping us on track in our lives as Christians, but they're also very helpful practically, because it's in these sorts of pitfalls that we can find people burning out in their service to others. And there are two main misunderstandings that we can face when it comes to service, these pitfalls. And the first is this: the belief that I am the one who serves. And that might sound strange at first, admittedly, but what I mean here concerns identity. Coming to equate oneself with being a person of service. I know that at first glance that might not sound like a bad thing at all, but consider this. If your whole identity becomes service, that's who you are, then it all depends on you. And in one way or another, you're doing it for yourself. The people served become a means to an end, and that end is supporting your own identity. The second misunderstanding is this: expecting that my service, my doing good for others, is going to fix a broader problem, going to achieve some greater results. For example, maybe that helping homeless people develop the skills to find gainful employment will end homelessness in the United States, or maybe even the whole world. Obviously, that would be a wonderful thing to achieve if it were possible in any way, right? But here too, the person served, the individual served, becomes a means to an end, with the end being this broader goal. In both of these instances, you can see how people become a means to an end, objectified to achieve some other goal, even if that goal is a good one. And in that, what looks like service is really just work to serve either oneself or one's projects, which isn't actually service at all. The solution, then, in every moment of our service to others, is properly ordering that service to God. As I said earlier, our acts of service should flow directly from our desire to live in God's love, to live like Christ. And when Christ served somebody, he did so purely out of love for that person. If we can mirror that love in our service, then we truly become Christ in the world. In our moment of helping someone, we communicate to that person that they really matter, that they are really loved, not that they're simply a cog in the wheel or a means of validating ourselves. And in serving others with the love of Christ, we move towards our goal of heaven, finding greatness through serving others and living the life of holiness that we see in the saints who have gone before us. Living the life of holiness that we see in Jesus Christ.